How did you get started with music?
So I grew up in Bangalore, India. I was born there, and I grew up in a pretty musical family. My dad played the mridangam. My older sister, who's 2 years older than me, she sings, and then my grandmother played the veena and she sang as well. So just growing up in that family, I kind of got introduced to music very early on, and yeah, so me and my sister would go to my grandmother's house, and she lived like 5 minutes away. So we just go, and we'd hang out with her, and then she'd teach us some songs, and yeah, and she had like harmonium, different instruments there too. But yeah, I learned the foundations of like music with her, and then around the age of 7, my parents thought maybe I could like experiment with an instrument as well. So I think I went and saw some like mridangam teachers, some violin teachers, and then I ended up choosing the violin. And yeah, I think um, my upbringing with music was really good because of the support I had from my family and my teachers. They didn't make it seem like it was a chore, or like sure there were some days where I didn't want to practice, but overall music was like a very enjoyable experience for me, and I think that's why I've kind of continued to do it to this day.
Yeah. So I remember in our previous conversations, you were telling me about how like your teacher had a huge role and like how the parent support. So like, what in your opinion is the value of parent support in music? Because I feel like it's not really seen all that much, though we are all asked to learn.
Yeah, I think it's super important to have like parents who kind of support you musically and kind of, or like creatively. Um, I feel like Indian parents in general, they want their kids in some sort of like art form for their kid growing up, and I think that's super important. Um, but I think my parents allowed me to experiment outside of, just what I was taught in class. One way they did that was my family would host kacheris, or like mini concerts with me and my sister, and they'd invite family and friends and then give us like gifts afterwards. So that's not just like traditional, like you come back home and you play what you like learned in class, but rather it's more, yeah, just it was like a fun experience, and like me and my sister would come like sit together and figure out what songs we wanted to perform and like how we wanted to do those. So I think just taking it beyond just classes, um, and parents showing support in that way has kind of impacted me very positively.
Talk to us a little bit about your teacher.
Yeah.
Like the role of music education in your life now.
I was very fortunate to have a great teacher in my life. He introduced music to me in a way that was not traditional. Like when I hear how maybe some of my friends learn music, it was very much like I learned this book and then I took this test and I went to the next level. Um, my teacher kind of had his own curriculum of music, and he would just sometimes um, like encourage me to experiment with music as well. And he'd also talk to me about how music can be used to um, improve yourself internally and work through challenges and stuff, and not just as like an art form that you perform for other people. Um, and I think, and with my classes, it wasn't just like I go there, play what I learned last week, and then learn something new. It was very much I'll go, other students would come, we'd maybe like um, hang out for a little bit, learn some music, listen to each other, learn something new about someone else's performance. And like the thing is, there'd be some beginners and some very advanced students, so it'd be really cool to be like, hey, maybe one day I can be like someone who's like been performing, like performing kacheris and concerts, and like, yeah, so I think just the environment that my teacher provided was super nourishing for me as a young musician, and I think that's why like I'm pretty passionate about, like, I am very passionate about music education, because I think the way you are taught to learn and respect music kind of has an impact of like how long you kind of stick with it. Because I talk to people and they're like, I did it throughout high school and then it just got too much for me, or I chose an other extracurricular, like I chose to do sports instead. And I just feel like that's kind of treating it like, I don't know, work. But when you kind of ingrain it into your day to day, it just feels more natural, and I don't know, I almost like personify my relationship with music. Like, how would I treat, like I'm treating a hobby like a person. So, you know, if I do it too much or like talk to someone too much, maybe I get sick of it. But if I don't keep in touch with them, maybe I lose contact with it. So it's kind of like building a healthy relationship with music. For me, it's like treating music, my violin, like a friend. So
Wow,
that's
that's beautiful.
yeah.
That's beautiful. Okay, so you mentioned there's a lot of reasons as to why you still practice today, and that's, I think, half the reason why you're so inspiring.
Mhm.
Is because you're so young and you still have such a passion for a lot of the traditional things that we've done in our culture, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, kudos to you on that. And also just, you know, you brought it over to social media. So, like,
Mhm.
what was that transition like into social media? Because I know you must have had, like, a little bit of a traditional look at the violin, right? And then moving to, you know, slowing down popular songs. Like, how did you make that transition?
Yeah. I think, yeah, so I did have like, so ages, like till the age of 11, I was learning Carnatic violin in India, and then I moved to New York. And that's when I started going to middle school in Pittsburgh, New York, and I thought I'd join the orchestra. And then the first day in orchestra, I learned that the way the violin is tuned in the Western world is completely different than the Carnatic violin. The way you hold it, the way you learn music, like reading sheet music, for example, is so different from what I'd learned before. So I started like incorporating aspects of the Western style of music with what I learned before. And so I think that's kind of where like the fusion side of things started to come. And then I also grew up on movies, so like Tamil movies, Hindi movies. Um, and like in the car, my mom would just play those soundtracks over and over again. So kind of also became a fan of that kind of music. Um, so then I think so yeah, I kind of just experimented on my own. I would play covers, and then like some functions here and there, like performances that I could do, I would like play like Bollywood violin. But then I would say over COVID, when I was a senior in high school and we just started quarantine and basically they said you're not going back to school. So at that point I was like, this is something I'd always wanted to do. I had like a small Instagram account where I'd post private like videos of me playing covers just to some friends, just to share with some friends. But I was like, maybe I can post this publicly. So I showed my face. Like I would cut it off like right here. But on TikTok, I posted like one video like in April of 2019, I believe, and that video did really well. It was like a sad version of like Chamak Chalo or something. And then like the next week I posted something and I got positive response again. So I kind of just kept going at it during COVID. And then like now that I'm in college, like a year after I went to college, it got harder with balancing classes and stuff, but like over summer break or winter break or like every once in a while I'll kind of pull out my violin and record something, and it's been cool to just kind of like, it's nice to go back and just see the progression of like my music and where I was in different stages of life over the past 4 years on my social media.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that you've been posting again.
Mhm.
So you took a little bit of a break because of school. So like how is it when it comes to practicing for music, like in college? What would you say to kids who might be worried about that?
I think it's hard with classes and stuff. I go to a pretty rigorous school academically, and so and even beyond that, it's like when I do have free time, I'd rather just hang out with friends.
Yeah.
So my advice would be like, again, it's a tough period to be in general. So like, but try and make time for it. So like, sometimes when I'm feeling bored, I'm like, is there something I could be doing right now? And it always comes down to music, so I just like play then. But if like I need to make time, I think a great way to kind of get in, just keep in touch with any sort of like art form is to kind of get involved on campus in that way. So if you dance, like maybe join a dance team if that's for you. Or there's so many like opportunities on campus to get involved. For me, like social media kind of is that way for me to keep going at it. So beyond just like posting videos, I perform at weddings. So like that's a whole experience, right? Working with the bride and groom and or like the wedding couple to kind of figure out what they want, what kind of songs, the arrangement. So that's one aspect. Another thing I've been doing is like recording instrumentals for artists, and I started doing that in the last 6 months. So yeah, I've kind of posted less on social media just because of how busy I am, but I think I'm like more inclined to go in the direction of, the like creating records and providing music for, instrumentals for artists and stuff like that.
Definitely. I remember like that transition is crazy when you go from like posting and working really hard online.
Yeah.
And then when your work carries you offline, it's like that's the craziest part.
Yeah.
Like, that transition's insane. Did you anticipate any of this? Like I can't imagine.
No.
You're so popular, like there's your name is like in every. I'm pretty sure every single one of us, like all the brown influencer girls, have posted at least one video with your sound in it. So like, what does that feel like? Like to have your sound everywhere?
It's awesome. I think like I did not anticipate it. Like I kind of went into it just out of I think boredom during quarantine. And I don't know, I feel I kind of always in my head felt limited as an instrumentalist, and my teacher is a solo performer. Like he performs he doesn't accompany anyone, or he performs with a brother, like in collaboration with someone. So I kind of always had that as a role, like him as a role model in that aspect. But personally, like I did not view like violin. I always thought it's like a part of an orchestra or, some sort of like backing instrumental type of thing. But to see the support that I've gotten on social media and kind of like the different visions people have for me and my like instrumental that I've not even seen. Like I was talking to someone yesterday and they were like, in like rap music, they always sample like some instrumental. And like you should create instrumentals for that. And that was something I'd not thought of before. So I think social media has kind of opened up my eyes to what I can do. And yeah, it's just been cool overall.
So if you could just describe your mental health journey, you mentioned briefly, like I'm kind of paraphrasing here, that your teacher allowed for your music to be a really big part of your life, like integrated into your life, and that it could be a very healing thing for you internally. So like first if you could describe your mental health journey and then how music kind of helped along the process.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say like the first 11 years of my life, I don't think it was, I honestly just really enjoyed it. I felt like it was a perfect world. I don't know if that's like the innocence of like being a child and being supported with family and like just growing up in Bangalore and the culture and school was great. I had friends and it was just, it was a good time. But I think it really, my mental health or like my awareness of like my mental health declining kind of was with moving. It was kind of abrupt, like over a 6-month span of me knowing and me moving. So that was kind of like tough, especially because I was so comfortable in the environment I was in, being so close to grandparents, a school I loved. So yeah, and it was also like in the middle of like 6th grade, so I think February is when I moved. So when I moved initially, I don't know, it was just like a new world in like, America. Like the idea of it was always like so like foreign, and it was not something I ever thought I'd be like living in America. But I think, yeah, like I went to a predominantly Caucasian school, so that's kind of where it starts, because you do kind of feel, I felt like, just like the side character or someone who was in other people's narratives and stories, and I didn't feel like I had my own in many ways. And I'm not blaming anyone else. I think it was just like how I felt because of the representation in that school. But I think in terms of music, I would come back. So I like in school, like I didn't really try to branch out or anything, make that many friends. I'd have friends in school. I'd come back home though, and the 2 communities that I had were like my local temple and then just home and family. So at temple and music, I would play. There would be bhajans every Thursday, devotional music, and I would play the violin there. Yeah. So back home, I'd have two communities where I would kind of explore music with. One was my family at home, and then one was the local temple. At the temple, I would go every Thursday to be a part of the bhajan group there. Bhajans are devotional songs, and basically one big element of bhajans are like the improvisation.
So if you can kind of go a little bit deeper as to how you felt when you moved, and like how that impact might stick with you still today.
Yeah, I think initially it was very hard. We lived in an apartment before we moved to our house, and the apartment was really nice. You take the bus. There were so many new things about living in America, like snow for the first time and things like that. And like also, oh, that's crazy.
Wow.
Did you just manifest?
That's great.
Yo, what are the next lottery numbers? That's crazy.
Wow.
He said snow.
He said God was like, hell yeah, let's do that.
All right, so new things like snow.
Yeah, so snow, but also the education like system in America is so different than India. I remember, specifically like in India, like every time a teacher would come into a classroom, you'd stand up and you'd like greet them, or like every time you answer a question, you'd stand up, and like by habit, when my like American teachers would do that, and I'd be standing up every time I answered a question. Like everyone would look at me like, "What are you doing?" But also like my teachers would be like, "You don't need to stand up every time you talk." But it's like those cultural things and just getting adjusted to that. And then other things like smaller things like accent and stuff like that. It was not like people make comments, but you could tell that you're different, right? So I think I kind of decided that it was better to just kind of blend in or just like not speak up that much rather than stand out and be, own that I was from India and like that I had that experience and like the culture that I'd grown up with. So I think that was kind of a hard time in just not feeling fully content because I'm not fully being myself. But at the same time, at first I was kind of angry at my parents and like just in general at the situation because I didn't want to move. But overall, like I feel like the education and where I am now, that transition, I'm like super grateful for.
Yeah. No. And then, so like, how did like any of the pieces from your mental health journey from your childhood kind of transition into your life today? Like, what does your mental health look like now?
Yeah, I think I'm like still healing. Part of the like not trauma, but like I guess the challenges that I faced during that transition, because I'm kind of reverting back to that version of myself that is proud of my culture. Like the whole platform I have now is based off of being Indian and that culture that like loves music. And I think going to college, that was more diverse than my high school and middle school was a huge part of it. And involving myself in communities that kind of really just encouraged my growth. And yeah, I think like going to college in general, I think for anyone who's kind of feeling kind of, I don't know, like restricted in their high school or middle school, I think like just kind of forcing yourself to go out of state or somewhere like far from home, or like even like more than like 2 hours away, I think it's like a huge step to take, because you're kind of sure it's like uncomfortable at first, but you figure it out on your own. And I think that experience of just moving to Atlanta for college, I go to Georgia Tech, and yeah, sure, initially it was kind of tough, but then I found my people like a couple of weeks in, and now they're still my best friends. So, and I don't know, I just think I feel so much more supported and more comfortable at the community that I made in college.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my main challenge that I'm facing currently is with imposter syndrome, or just not feeling that I kind of deserve what opportunities I get, because I don't feel like I put in like the work, because it's not like I've devoted my life to music. It's not that I don't know, I feel like you work to a certain point and then you feel like you gain some accomplishments. But I think in another way of looking at it, it's just like I've just been posting stuff for fun, like really just for fun. And now I'm getting some cool opportunities. But yeah, every time I do get something cool, like coming my way, like, oh, this opportunity to perform for these people or to perform for this crowd, my initial thoughts are like, there are like so many better violinists out there, or like people who kind of do the same thing I do, just don't post it on social media. And while that's true, I think like I have to like tell myself to not question it, because, you know, it's an opportunity for me to continue with my journey with music. And I don't think I'm taking away from anyone else by kind of pursuing my own dreams. So, but yeah, I think that's kind of something that's reoccurring. But again, I think I feel like the support I get online, and I have people who believe in me more than I believe in myself. And I think that's like the best people to surround yourself with. So I think that's kind of who I rely on when I do have these tough like ideas and thoughts in my head.
Wonderful. So what do you feel like is your duty to your culture?
Yeah, so I think duty is a very heavy word, and like in my head it kind of is the same as like purpose. So when I think about like my purpose in terms of my culture, I think about representation, and in my eyes I feel like representation can be anything, like me being in a classroom of like non-Indians, I am representing Indian people in that classroom. So just being in that room is representation, but I think if you kind of couple that with like having intentionality behind your actions and the way you are in that room, I think that's what takes it a step further. So for me, sure, on social media, I kind of represent Indian music, but the way I see myself improving in that aspect is being more specific in representing my culture. Having a platform and having a platform on social media platforms that don't represent that many South Indian and like Tamil people, and I am Tamil, so I feel like that's one way I kind of want to see myself improve, is kind of representing that aspect of my identity more. In terms of like opportunities that I get in the future, I kind of also want to rely on the network that I've built with other South Asian creatives, but also kind of make sure I'm giving them the support back, because I feel like all the opportunities I've gotten in the past like year or 6 months have been from people in the same space who've kind of reached out to me, and I want to make sure that I kind of keep them in mind as well for future things that I get myself into.
So what is your duty?
In general, I honestly don't know. I think I'm kind of, it's easy to break it down, like my duty in terms of music, my duty in terms of like my friendships in that way, but in terms of like my duty overall, I guess for me, I would say it's kind of just balancing all these different aspects of my life, but making sure like tying back to like everything that my parents invested into me, kind of making sure that I'm making the most out of the life that I've been so fortunate to have gotten, in terms of like the teachers, the environments I've grown up in, the grandparent support, you know, all those small experiences that I've grown up having, that should be worth something, right? And like, sure, it's been worthwhile for me, and like for me to kind of, in terms of my life experience, it's just been great memories, but I want them to be more than just memories, kind of like how can you channel that into something that can help others. So yeah, I don't know, I think I kind of want to find different ways of doing that. Music is definitely just one of those ways. But I think just kind of continuing to kind of support myself, but also the people that kind of support me is super important to me. So yeah.